I'm Tesla. And I'm Hyundai. We created the Model 3, which is the best sedan in the world. But we're going to make the better sedan in the world by doubling up the Model 3 and making the Ioniq 6. It's gonna have better range, it's gonna have better efficiency, and a lower price. That's great. But actually, crossovers are the most popular, and we have built the best crossover in the world, the Model Y. Yeah? Oh yeah? Okay. Well, we're going to make the Model How, and it's going to be more efficient and faster and cheaper than the Model Y. But if you want something fancier than that, of course, we have the Model X. Well, we're gonna have the Model XX, which will be twice as good as the Model X. There's just more X's. That sounds kind of weird. That sounds wrong. Okay, well, whatever. It'll have pixels. There will be pixels all over it. It'll be so cool. Is that important for it to have pixels? Does it need to have pixels all over it, or? Yes, because we're all living in a simulation, so reality is just an accumulation of pixels. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Good. All right. You are welcome. I want to give some credit where credit is due, because I know I mostly talk about Tesla on this channel, and that's because I think Tesla is most of the EV market. So there's not a lot of things that Legacy Auto is able to do that genuinely impress me. That's why I wanted to dive into the price reveal of the Ioniq 6, because it was much less than I was expecting. So basically, there's really only one trim that I think most people are interested in with the Ioniq 6, which is the rear-wheel drive long-range option, because this is a reasonably priced EV at just over $45,000. So this is honestly closer to the price of the Model 3 rear-wheel drive, the car I'm driving, and yet it has an EPA estimate of 361 miles, which is longer range than even the Tesla Model 3 long range, definitely longer than the Model 3 Performance, although that's definitely targeting more of a performance-oriented market. The point is, Tesla doesn't really have that much in inventory for the long-range Model 3 anymore. They turned it off on the configurator page. They just say later in 2023 it'll be available, but I'm even having a hard time finding any long-range Model 3s in existing inventory now. Before, at the end of last year, I was seeing a bit more of them, but I think especially with the price reductions and the federal tax credit, there's definitely been a huge surge in people interested in buying those, so there's very few available, at least where I am, which means that Hyundai is wisely entering a field that Tesla doesn't seem to have that much presence in. And the same thing I've been telling Lucid for years is that having a 400 or 500 mile range is exponentially more difficult and complicated than just having a really solid, 350 or high 300 mile range by using a much more efficient design. And that's what's really cool about the Ioniq 6 is they put such a big emphasis on aerodynamics and efficiency that using a 77 kilowatt hour battery pack, they're able to go further than what a long range Model 3 can do, and also undercut the price of the Model 3. And I think that comes from a lot of different tactics, but for the most part of the reason I think they're able to price so low is because they're reusing a lot of components and parts between different models. This is still built on the eGMP platform that Hyundai and Kia are sharing. Both the Kia EV6, the Ioniq 5, and the Genesis GV60 are all using the same platform, and that's allowed them to ramp up production much faster than other legacy automakers because, again, they reduce cost, they reduce complexity by sharing as many components as possible. So that's another good idea, kind of a page out of the Tesla book in my view. Although there's a lot of different aesthetic differences between those models, the underlining powertrain and battery pack technology is very much shared between them. And knowing that using a lot of the same parts and a lot of the same platform as these other vehicles, just by redesigning the exterior a bit and making it more aerodynamic, making it lower to the ground, and prioritizing using smaller wheels, you can squeeze substantially more range out of this vehicle than its alternatives, and I just find that very, very impressive considering this Ioniq 6 is also going to qualify for the same types of tax credits that Teslas do, so that's not an inherent advantage to Teslas either. And the only thing I'd be concerned about with the Ioniq 6 pricing compared to Tesla's is, of course, Hyundai is still going to be relying on the dealership model, which means dealers may be applying markups, especially if there's a vehicle that's very, very high in demand. There's a good chance that a lot of people are going to want to buy it, therefore therefore dealers are going to jack up the prices on it. But I will at least admit, from my own experience of test driving an Ioniq 5, the dealer we were at had several Ioniq 5s in stock, and none of the dealer markups were very high. Usually either they were selling it for MSRP, or if there was a markup, it was $500 to $1,000, nothing too major. But that, of course, is going to depend on your region. My main concern with the Ioniq 6 is, okay, you have all of these other trims, right? They have a standard range option for $41,000, but only 240 miles of range, which that's got to be using a smaller battery pack. That's such a drastic difference between the long range and the standard range. And also they have all-wheel drive models with lower range, but more acceleration and more horsepower, and there's a limited edition, more performance-oriented model that's actually more than the Model 3 performance, but definitely doesn't get as good a range as the Model 3 performance. So I don't think that many people would be interested in these vehicles for the acceleration. I think most people that are in the market for, you know, a sub $50,000 electric sedan are going to be interested in how much does it cost and how far can it go. And that's where I think the Ioniq 6 really outshines pretty much everything else on the market, because the only vehicles with more range than the Ioniq 6 are all $90,000 plus, right? Like, they actually beat the efficiency of every Tesla with a vehicle that's pretty affordable. You know, Lucid has beat the efficiency of every Tesla with the Lucid Air Pure and the Lucid Air Touring, but those are easily $90,000, $100,000 vehicles that is not going to be competing very much, considering Lucid seems to be struggling to keep their orders because every month they have like over 1,000 people cancel their reservation. Tesla's not helping with that, I'm sure, but if there is going to be a way for Tesla alternatives to survive, because I understand some people don't like the ultra minimalism of Tesla's interiors, some people don't like the build quality Teslas are known for, so I'm not one of those people that just thinks in the future Tesla will be the only car company and there will be no alternatives. But if we're looking among the alternatives and trying to figure out what's going to make it, what's going to prioritize what people are interested in, I think high efficiency for low price is the most likely winner. And I wish that they would not have so many different trims, because I'm worried that we'll find a bunch of Ioniq 6s at dealers, but it's all going to be of these other trims that no one wants. The 240 mile range variant or the 270 mile range variant that costs more but it's faster. Like, I say, just go all in on that long range rear-wheel drive model, because that's going to be the real breadwinner. That's what I think most people are going to be interested in, at least in my view. Maybe if they had a lower range option that was LFP and like sub $40,000, I would be interested in that, but none of these are using iron phosphate. And it's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of Rivian, is because Rivian was kind of targeting a demographic that Tesla was not in. They started with pickup trucks and full-size SUVs and delivery vans, and Tesla doesn't really have anything that competes much with the Rivian lineup, which was a great idea because they knew there was market demand for it, and that's why Rivian has a huge, ever-growing backlog. Even as they're ramping up production very quickly, still lots of people want to buy more of their vehicles. No demand issue there at all. So in the same way, I'm looking at the Ioniq 6 and I'm saying, hey, Tesla, as far as we can tell, is not really building long-range Model 3s right now. They only have the Model 3 rear-wheel drive, which I love and is great, but for people that want something with longer range or a more traditional interior with more physical buttons and dials, and someone that cares about having high range at a reasonable price, there's a lot of demand in the market for that type of product, and that's what I think Hyundai should target. And I think they can boast a lot about how they basically have the most efficient vehicle on the market now, matching the efficiency of the Lucid Air Pure and the Lucid Air Touring. However, they cost about half as much as those vehicles. So I know I've been saying a lot of nice things about the Ioniq 6, and it might be because I drove a Hyundai before I drove my Model 3, so there's a little bit of bias there, but my only complaint I will give it is that they are still using CCS. That's kind of a universal complaint I have on all EVs, but even that Tesla supercharging advantage may not be as strong in a couple years, now that we have more concrete numbers from the White House saying that Tesla plans on having over 7,500 supercharging stalls available to CCS vehicles by the end of 2024. And you know, the Ioniq 6 is just slowly making its debut this year, so for the vast majority of its life on the road, I think there's likely going to be a much bigger, hopefully more reliable CCS network for them to charge from. And if you have to go non-Tesla for whatever reason it may be, I think having the most amount of range possible is the best way to deal with the CCS network, because yeah, ChargePoint, Electrify America, they don't seem very reputable. I hope they can get their acts together, but I still see people complaining about them all the time. But long term, I'm hopeful that Tesla and their superchargers will be able to increase the desirability of road tripping in any EV. Doesn't matter if it's Tesla, doesn't matter if it has NACS. And you know, I'm still a huge fan of Aptera's approach with going with hyper efficiency and solar charging, but it's going to be a while before those those are on the road and they only sit 2 people, whereas the Ioniq 6 is a more classic 5-seater. So I just think the market for this is huge, and I want to be optimistic on the future. I think it's very easy for a lot of Tesla bulls to just kind of start listing all the bad things going on with all of Tesla's competitors and say, oh, Ford had to shut down this, or GM sucking at this. But I still think there's hope for Legacy Auto that is wise enough to know how to transition properly, and I think the Ioniq 6 is kind of like the epitome of how to transition to electric vehicles properly. Reusing parts between models, focusing on aerodynamics and efficiency to have high range, and because it's an 800-volt architecture, it'll still support very fast charging over 200 kilowatts, so should be a pretty incredible road tripping machine for the money. And I'm curious if there's anyone out there interested in picking one up. Let me know, because I would love to test drive one of these things once they're available. And thank you again to everybody supporting the channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.